thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak to us, Poppy. So to everybody joining, so Poppy Humphrey is from Manchester Student Homes, which is an organisation that here at SOS UK we really look up to and really admire the work of, and they do excellent work helping students integrate into the community. And I won't do too many spoilers for Poppy's slides, so I'll let Poppy introduce Student Homes herself, but just to say we're really excited to have you here, Poppy, and thank you for joining us. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, and if you could just let me know that you can see everything okay there.
Of course, yeah, it's displaying perfectly.
Okay, so far everything's okay with the tech, that's good. All right, thanks again, Michelle. Thank you very much to everyone out there that's listening, or if you're listening at some point in the future. I hope that you've had a fantastic conference, and I'm conscious that this is the last session of the entire conference. So hopefully we'll take you out with on a high note. If you've got any questions as I'm going along, then I'm very happy to be interrupted, and Michelle is going to help me out with that. So Michelle, if there's anything that pops up in the chat, then feel free to chip in and I can respond to it, or likewise at the end, very happy to answer any questions or discuss anything in further detail. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my role and Manchester Student Homes, and then we're going to talk you through about some of the work that we've done previously with regard to supporting students when they're living off campus, and then also more recently. I don't want to discuss too much COVID, because I'm not sure if you feel the same as me, but it feels as though it's just infiltrating every single part of our life at the moment. But I want to talk to you about some really positive things that we've done to support students in the past year or so. I'm Poppy. Thank you very much for coming along to my presentation this afternoon, and on such a beautiful day as well. I'm dialing in from just outside of Manchester, and it's not raining here, which is quite remarkable. So I am the off-campus student affairs officer, and I'm based at Manchester Student Homes. Manchester Student Homes is a jointly funded department of the University of Manchester and Manchester Metropolitan University. We also have service level agreements with a number of other institutions within the city, such as Royal Northern College of Music, Salford University, and also the Manchester College as well. So we originally started out, you can just bear with me as I'm trying to move through the presentation. Sorry if this isn't working. We originally started out as an advice bureau for students, and that was probably about 20 years ago. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Unipol model, but we were very much there to provide advice and support and guidance to students about all aspects of housing. We're not legally trained, but we do offer free information and guidance, and check people's contracts, and generally any concerns to do with housing. Students are encouraged to come to us from colleagues within the university.
And Poppy,
yes.
And are we meant? So we're still on that first slide, which is like the black slide with the. Yeah. Sorry, for some reason I thought you were meant to be on the next one. Sorry, carry on.
No, I'm trying to. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. I knew. Do you know what? I knew it was too soon when I said that the tech was working. Please bear with me, and thank you for your patience. So, Manchester Student Homes, we started out about 20 years ago. As a housing bureau for students, and then in the past sort of 10-11 years or so, we found that we've been getting more and more involved in community work, and our view is very much that housing and community go hand in hand, and you can't have one without the other. So in essence, Manchester Student Homes operates on behalf of the universities in Manchester to provide services to students on all aspects of campus living. So a very simplistic view would be housing and community. I'm about to try and move forward to the next slide, and hopefully this will work. Yes, it does. Perfect. So in practice, we're very much seen as offering advice about housing, advice about community, but what that means in reality is that we are seen as the front door to the university. Our offices are based down in Fallowfield. For those of you that are unaware, Fallowfield is a couple of miles south of the campuses in Manchester, and it's a hugely diverse community, but there is a high density of students that live off campus. And we do also have student accommodation that's kind of just on the periphery of Fallowfield as well. So we're out there in the community, and what we find is that we have students accessing our services, we have long-term residents contacting us for advice and support when it comes to issues relating to the students in the university, local businesses, but also those people that, that work in other aspects of the community as well. And going back to our core sort of business, just so you know, this is just a snapshot of all of the things that we do at Manchester Student Home. So looking at the left-hand column, we run a landlord accreditation scheme and provide advice and guidance, as I said, about contract checking and anything to do with ensuring that students have access to safe and fair housing, and make sure that we're sort of maintaining those standards in the student housing market. So aside from our landlord accreditation scheme, we also do a huge amount in the community, and I'm not going to go through all of these. And if I'd have picked up every single piece of work and put it onto this slide, I think I would have had to have used size 2 font to put it all in. So I've just picked the key ones here, but I suppose the purposes of how I've become involved in work around sort of alcohol and drugs in an off-campus setting, we have our Hall to Home campaign, and this is very much aimed at supporting students pre, during and post that transition from halls of residence out into the community. And if you think about that, that could potentially be quite an overwhelming piece of work, anything to do with that transition and thereafter. So we split it down into sort of manageable chunks, or if I'm presenting to senior colleagues, I like to call them thematic policy areas. And they are housing, which is our core business, but also a huge amount of work around student safety, whether that's from a property security or a personal safety perspective. Also looking at waste and environmental issues, looking at drugs and alcohol, and I'll come on to that shortly. Looking at things around noise and antisocial behaviour, but also celebrating the massive contributions that our students bring to the city and also to the local and hyperlocal communities, either with sports teams or the economic contribution, the vibrancy, the diversity, the human capital that they bring, or through the tens of thousands of hours of volunteering that they contribute to our communities. So that's a summary of what we do, and I'm going to talk to you about how things were ticking along quite nicely in Manchester in an era known as BC, which is before COVID. So I'm not sure, for those of you that were on the call slightly earlier and heard Michelle and I talking about our involvement with alcohol impact. Manchester Student Home is really, really proud that we're working with Manchester Metropolitan Students' Union right at the beginning of the NUS Alcohol Impact initiative. We were involved in the pilot year for that. We did a huge amount of work together in partnership with the Students' Union. And one of the projects that we were really proud of is we created a video which was in an off-campus setting, and it followed a group of students throughout one evening and looked at some of the unintended consequences of excessive alcohol consumption. I think the thing that we were super proud of about this particular video was that everyone who featured in it was a real person. So it was filmed live, on location, I should say, in Fallowfield. We had real students, real landlords, real long-term residents, and real police officers. And we put the video out and we received some fantastic feedback about that. We also received some feedback from people who didn't necessarily think it was a good video, but we received over 10,000 hits on YouTube. We're talking a few years ago, so that was something we were quite pleased about, and an article in the Huffington Post as well. But overall we were really pleased with that as a piece of work. So that's going back sort of several years now. So we've been involved with alcohol impact for quite a sort of significant period of time. Some other work that we've done as well is working with some leading academics. So to name a few, we've got a really good relationship with a chap called Dr. Rob Ralphs, who's based at Manchester Metropolitan University, and he is a senior lecturer in criminology, and how we at Manchester Student Homes have worked very closely with Dr. Ralphs and his student groups to develop specific academic research projects, student-led research projects, looking at the use of alcohol and drugs within certain groups of students and their attitude towards that. He's done some really interesting work looking at the club industry as well. We also worked with Oliver Sutcliffe, who is also based out of Manchester Metropolitan University. They've got a really interesting initiative there called Mandrake, and at the end I've put the link to it. This is a drug testing facility where they work very closely with the staffing halls of residents and also Greater Manchester Police to test any drugs that have been confiscated, to work out if there's any batches that are going to dangerous batches, and then following on from that they publish messages about safety to students. So Mandrake is a very interesting concept. We've also worked with Professor Darren Smith. So Darren is based out of, or Professor Smith is based out of Loughborough University, and he actually coined the phrase studentification. He's done a huge amount of research all over the world, actually, primarily in England, but also in North America and also China, looking at the student experience and the impact of large concentrations of students in off-campus communities. He's also done some interesting work in Leeds looking at de-studentification. So that's when the area changes again, when you see the high density of students moving to other parts of the city, perhaps to more purpose-built student accommodation, and the effect on the communities once the students have perhaps migrated to elsewhere. So we do a lot of work with academics, and as well as that, we also commission student-led research. So each year I get to work with groups across both universities to deliver some insights into various different issues relating to students off campus. For the purposes of the presentation today, two in particular that were most insightful. The first was a project that we asked two students from Manchester Metropolitan to deliver. And this was probably about 4 years ago, and I gave them a very sort of generic project title, which was go and find out about attitudes towards alcohol amongst the student community. What they found, they went and interviewed service users at the Brian Hoare clinic in Manchester, which is a unit for people with primarily alcohol dependency issues. And the feedback that they gave in their academic research was that they were really surprised, because and it was wonderful that they were invited in to speak to some of the service users. In their view, they anticipated that there was going to be people that were significantly older accessing those services. But when they had discussions with the service users, there were many people there that said that their relationship with alcohol started at university, particularly in their first year, and then as they went through the trajectory and moved off campus, and then third year and potentially fourth year, they felt as though their relationships and behaviours were really defined in that first year. And the feedback that we had as part of that project was that actually we were seeing people with really corrosive liver damage that in their late 20s, early 30s, just because the way in which certain people were drinking would be classed as so excessive. So that was the first piece of research that I just wanted to reference. And if anyone is interested in finding out more about these student-led research projects, very happy to share them with you and share the findings. The second piece of research was a project that I asked a group from the University of Manchester to undertake. And this was looking at the changing patterns of socialisation. Unfortunately, a great deal of my role is taken up with dealing with some of the challenges that are faced when you have a large concentration of young people or students living within a certain geographical area. So, for example, lots of complaints about noise, antisocial behaviour and parties, and that's still the case at the current time as well. I also just want to point out that year on year, I deal with more complaints from students about their peers, and particularly this year, I've dealt with a huge amount of complaints from students, not only about their peers, but also about long-term residents and their behaviour as well. So this project, looking at the changing patterns of socialisation, was really interesting because came off the back of me dealing with probably my busiest year in terms of complaints about large-scale house parties. And unfortunately, we had a few incidents where there was some significant safety issues linked to those large-scale house parties, either from a fire safety perspective or students unfortunately being the victims of serious assaults. So these students went out and did some really, really thorough research with their peers, and what they explained to me was that actually there is a real death of the club industry in Manchester and beyond as well, and that actually the preference from students is that they don't necessarily feel comfortable going out to socialise in clubs or in other settings like that. There was also the talk about sponsorship and influencers, and that's very appealing, and it's something that we experience a lot of in Manchester. So companies that are very well known, alcohol companies, Smirnoff comes to mind, and Bacardi as well, will actually seek out students and encourage them to host large-scale house parties, and they will sponsor students for that and sponsor the house party. So those projects were particularly insightful, and I think the one thing for us is that whenever we work with a student group, we always ask them to make recommendations to us about how we can improve our services, our messages, our campaigns to students. So we built in a lot of their recommendations in terms of events and community action days. We also tailored our communications to students. We also tailored our communications to accredited landlords, about encouraging students to be aware of some of the dangers associated with large-scale house parties. And we also, off the back of that, worked with Manchester City Council to set up a local pub watch group as well. And that group has been really, really effective. Obviously, things have gone slightly quiet in recent times, but the pub WhatsApp group has recently got very busy, with everyone getting very excited about reopening. But we do a lot of work with the licensing team at Manchester City Council to make sure that the pubs and anyone operating within the nighttime economy in Manchester is making sure that they're doing so in a responsible way, making sure that our students are kept safe when they're out and about. So I think that this might be the opportunity to give myself a break from talking and for you to maybe have a break from listening to me. And I'd like to show you, with the help of Michelle, a little video that was created. Back in November 2019, I actually went back to live with a group of students, and the reason why I did this is because I'm conscious that when you're doing a job like mine, which is ultimately supporting students at a particular point in their life, it's important that I have an understanding of the student experience. So I went back to live with a group of students for a whole week, and there is a suite of videos, but I'm going to hold those back and I'm happy to share them with you. But I think Michelle is going to show you the trailer for Poppy's Wild Week.
Wicked. Can you see the screen now? Is it all right, Poppy?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, I'm going to press play. So this is the first time this conference that we've used a video. We've done lots of tech checks, so it should all be okay. But Poppy, if you just unmute and tell me if there's anything wrong, so I can't see the chat box.
Okay.
Students sometimes have a bad reputation in terms of being noisy, disrespectful, and not integrating into the local community. But are we just hearing one side of the story? In order to find out what life is really like for a group of students living off campus, I'm going back to live with them for a whole week, and I'm scared.
Hi.
Hello, hi, nice to meet you too. I'm Poppy. So basically Poppy, be funny. Okay, got it. Literally got no idea what's going on.
Again.
I'm genuinely surprised at how busy it is. Don't look at my search history.
Hello? Is anyone in?
I'm literally the world's worst driver. Oh, who am I passing it to? Oh, sorry Denise. It just goes to show how easy it would be for anyone with far from the best of intentions to get in and you know, nick people's stuff or worse. Do I get paid for today?
Sorry, no.
Can I take this off though? Nice pub, nice little bar. There's Manchester Student Homes offices, guys.
Hey, we can come and say hi to you.
This one's obviously going to be way more secure because it doesn't have a door handle, which means you need a key to get in.
I mean, that takes doesn't it? There's some really lovely bits that are just on the doorstep as well, yeah.
We're still going, we're still going.
How the did that? At least I didn't catch that on camera.
There we go.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Okay, so just a couple of points to make with regards to the clip that you've just seen. Apologise for the beeping as well. I did actually pass my driving test first time, which is remarkable. And when I showed that video to my mum, I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "It makes it a lot easier to score a goal in hockey when there's no one in the goal." And I was like, "Thanks, Mum, bring me down to earth." So that was a really interesting week. The group that I lived with was a mixture of second and third years from across both universities, studying a broad range of different subjects. And we worked with a company called Campus Life. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Campus Life. I'll put a link at the end of the presentation. But I'm just going to share my screen again. Sorry about that, everybody. They're based out of Leeds, and they are a student communications company that do a huge amount of really insightful consultation with students about all aspects of the student experience. So if you're not familiar with Campus Life, it's definitely worth looking into the work that they do. Campus Life were very considered in the group that they chose, because we wanted them to be relatable to a certain cohort of students that live off campus, primarily in the Manchester area. And during my week with this group of students, we had really candid chats about drug and alcohol perceptions and their use of drugs and their attitudes towards alcohol, and they were very candid with me. certain things they didn't necessarily want to go on camera, which I understood, but I felt as though it was useful to get their input into certain projects that we'd worked on before, and some of them they felt were, you know, appropriate in terms of the tone and that they were relevant, and some of them they had to give me the devastating news that they thought that the campaigns that we were running were way off the mark in all aspects. They also reinforced some of the findings from the previous academic research project that I mentioned, changing patterns of socialisation, and they couldn't agree more. That actually it's very appealing for certain groups to host large-scale house parties and to have their parties sponsored by high-profile companies. So you can see all of the videos. They're split down into different themes. We did a lot of work with the police, where we went out and looked at property security. I went on a litter pick as well, which I have to say wasn't my favourite day, but the whole suite of videos, and you're more than welcome to have a look. We were just about to go live with these as COVID hit, and understandably the decision was taken that we couldn't roll them out because there is a lack of social distancing, but it's something that we're looking forward to rolling out as and when things return back to, I'm not going to say normal, Michelle and I had that conversation before, but return back to some point where perhaps social distancing isn't as much of an issue as it is now. So that's some of the work that we were doing BC before COVID, and if you could just bear with me, I'm struggling to move on to the next part of the presentation, but I think that we're here now. Okay, so in terms of some of the demands that we've seen for service and support in recent times, just ahead of the presentation today, I got in contact with a colleague from University of Manchester who runs the health and wellbeing services. So if you can hear some strange noises, I've got a family of pigeons outside, so I'll just choose to try and ignore them. Sorry about that. So my colleague Spencer Davis from University of Manchester advised that they've had an increase of 25% in terms of the take-up for health and wellbeing services, and I think that there will be no surprises with that. What they did say was that accessing support for drug and alcohol concerns or issues was really hard to qualify, because quite often those issues are part of a bigger picture, and that individuals will vary the extent to which they want those disclose those issues or want to discuss them. But some really interesting work that's going on here in Manchester is a pop-up clinic called Change, Grow, Live, which is focusing primarily on drug and alcohol services for students. So feedback has been that has been really, really well received by the students, but in terms of the data, because it's the first year that it's been delivered, we haven't got any comparable statistics, but needless to say, there is a huge amount of work going on to support students at the current time. I also should have said this earlier on, and the academic research project, Changing Patterns of Socialisation, I'm actually working with a new group of students at the moment. I've given them exactly the same project, but I wanted them to look at students' attitudes towards alcohol, drugs and socialising through the lens of COVID. They're currently just in the early stages of that project, but I'm very excited to see what their findings are with regards to that, and I'd be very happy to come back at a further point and present those findings perhaps with the students as well. In terms of the demand for our service at Manchester Student Homes from a sort of core housing perspective, we've seen demand this year increase threefold. And anecdotally, what we're getting is many students that want to be released from their contracts, understandable, but also lots of students contacting us to say that they feel very uncomfortable with the behaviour of their housemates, either linked to drugs or alcohol, or to their behaviour in terms of not complying with current restrictions. But certainly we're getting more concerns raised by students about their peers in terms of behaviour. Just in terms of some of the work that I've been dealing with Manchester City Council and Greater Manchester Police, so far this academic year, we've dealt with 981, so just short of 1,000 different incidents, both on and off campus. The vast majority have been off campus. And again, there has been a significant number of students that have raised concerns with us about other community members. And it's important to say that when we talk about the community, we very much see that students are part of our community. So I think the other thing that we are really keen to focus on, not just at Manchester Student Homes, but across our partnership, whether that's with our students' unions or with the council or with the police, is that we're all working together to support communities within communities and not see students as one big homogenous glob. So, for example, we've been doing a lot of work with international students and also the International Society as well, to put on virtual chats to see how they're doing when they're living off campus. Primarily, lots of international students live in purpose-built student accommodation rather than the HMO properties out in the community, but that's still off campus. So we've been doing events to engage with our international students. And what we found is that we were putting on these events to give them housing advice and support, and the conversations quickly turned into people feeling very isolated and under a lot of pressure. Again, no surprises, and I'm sure things that have been discussed throughout the conference. But I think even as we move back to a point where perhaps we're going back into the office and we can put on events face to face, it's really important that we do keep up with the virtual engagement as well, because we've been receiving lots of feedback from students that tell us that that's really, really worthwhile. So the other thing that I just wanted to just point out as well is that I said right at the beginning, we're seen as the front door to the community. It's a fine balance to respond to all of the needs of all of those people that live and work in the community. And it's fair to say that there are quite a few tensions in our off-campus communities, but nevertheless we're here to support all of those who live and work, but fundamentally we are a student support service. Okay, so one thing that we feel has worked very, very well since the beginning of September is that we've always had a really strong partnership in Manchester, and I say partnership with Manchester City Council, Greater Manchester Police, Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue, the universities, of course, and of course our student unions and the elected officers, as well as the permanent members of staff. For the first 3 months of the academic year, we met daily, not Saturday and Sunday, as a multi-agency group. And we ensured that we had the right people around the virtual table. So that was colleagues from halls of residence, colleagues from security, colleagues that led on comms. We had senior colleagues there. We had operational staff there as well. We had senior police officers and also some of the bobbies on the beat. We had colleagues from the City Council's ASB team. We had colleagues involved in health and wellbeing. And those meetings were half an hour every morning to look at issues around behaviour, but also issues around student safety, health and wellbeing. And from that, we looked at targeted communications that we needed to put out to our students, as well as wider community stakeholders such as long-term residents. And that was really, really useful in terms of being able to assess what was going on both on campus and off campus, but also making sure that when we were getting feedback from our students about what we were doing well and what we weren't doing so well, that we could respond to that appropriately. I think the other thing that we need to bear in mind as well is that we've got communities like Fallowfield in Manchester, and we've got very hyper local issues going on there, but then we also have local issues as Manchester as a whole, and then within a national context and a global context. And I think that what happens globally then trickles down to nationally, to locally, and then hyper locally as well. So we look at the bigger picture as part of those meetings. Now, what we've decided was that to meet every single morning was quite onerous, and actually we did have real buy-in from the whole partnership. We now meet twice weekly as a group, and we found that that's been really effective. There has been a huge amount of firefighting, but I think that that's just a realistic assessment of how things have been for the past year. But we are trying to plan, and going forward, I'll just skip ahead to this and then come back to the previous slide. What we've done is we've looked at the government roadmap for easing restrictions, and we've overlaid it with some work of Greater Manchester Police, some work of Manchester City Council, and then we've also looked at some key dates in line with the student academic year as well. And from that, we will, as a partnership, be pushing out messages to really support our students. So an example that I can tell you now is that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see some changes where 2 households are able to go out and meet outside. Now, if you were to look at a large student HMO, you may have a household of 13 who is able to legally mix with another household of 13. The perception may be that that's a group of students who are breaking the rules, whereas actually they're not doing anything wrong. So it's really important for us that we're clear with students about expectations of behaviour and what they are able to do and what they're not able to do, just as any other citizen of the country, but that we also manage the perceptions of the long-term residents around this. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, as everybody does, with regards to easing lockdown restrictions and making sure that our students feel supported during that process. As always, we are always listening to what our students are telling us, and this is a bit of a challenge for us. So you'll see the picture on the right hand side, Fallowfield student group. This was a Facebook group that was set up as a ticket selling site a few years ago, and from that it grew and grew in popularity, and it's now got about 50,000 members on it. Myself and my manager have worked very hard with the moderators of that group, because we recognise that actually, whilst we have 50,000 students right there that we can get messages out to about community living and where they can come to access support and about all sorts of things in line with our Horse to Home campaign, it's not appropriate for us as officers to go and engage with students in what we see as a very protected space, if that makes sense. But what we do is weekly sweeps of the Fallowfield student group, and that's with the permission of the moderators. And the insight that we get is invaluable. And it's also been very useful in terms of us gauging student perception of the universities, but also external partnership agencies like the police, for example. It's also been really instrumental in the police successfully solving a number of crimes as well, because what we feel is that students talk to each other. It's become almost like a Facebook neighbourhood watch, but they don't always report things to the police for whatever reason. So we make sure that on a weekly basis we're just keeping an eye on Fallowfield student group, just to listen to what our students are saying, because we understand that that can inform our campaigns and make sure that, again, they're relevant in terms of their tone. And actually, some of the things that the students are saying aren't always positive about the work that we do, but we have to take that on board. And ultimately, that's something that we need to utilise to shape our campaigns going forward. So, next steps. As always, we need to listen to our students, but also to all members of our community. We, when we're able to, are going to develop some community action days. So we've got some coming up in the next month, hopefully, if we're allowed to do that, which will be getting students, long-term residents, landlords, people that live and work in the community to come out and do some community cleanups, as well, as we're starting to see nicer weather, even in Manchester. Unfortunately, we're seeing issues around the use of our parks, and our students have been, whilst they have been involved in some of the issues with the parks, they've also mobilised themselves to come out and get involved in community cleanups, which has been fantastic. The academic research project that I mentioned before, I'm looking forward to seeing the findings of particularly of the changing patterns of socialisation through the lens of COVID. We've also got another academic research project being delivered by students looking at the local offer in the South Manchester area. So, for example, we have a high density of pubs and takeaways and general sort of nighttime economy related establishments. So we're doing some work with Manchester City Council and the students on that. We also need to continue looking at the transition off campus and the additional support that our students are going to need, and I would say now more so than ever in all respects. And also just the fact that this is going to be very much a team effort as well, so we need to make sure that when students are moving off campus that they've got really strong relationships with those long-term residents, and that's something that we need to work with both parties to help facilitate. And that also when students are moving off campus they have the support of their landlord as well if there's any challenges there. I think we need to review our educational campaigns as well, and that's something that we started looking at already, but I think we'll be in more of a position to look at that as we review sort of feedback and intelligence of what our students are saying to us about the types of support that they need next academic year, and ultimately that links to our services being shaped in response to what our students need. So, the other thing that I should have mentioned, apologies, is that we've linked to some of the messages that were on the Fallowfield student group, which is the Facebook group. We've set up a number of working parties with our students. One was around concerns to do with sexual harassment and sexual assaults in Manchester. And off the back of that, a group was set up with students, with the council, with the police, with colleagues from the universities, and also the Students' Union as well, to make sure that we were responding to the concerns of the students, and that actually it was really being driven by the students. So that's one particular piece of work. We also have had concerns from students about tenancy turnover and how that's going to look as well. So that's when the students are moving from their halls of residence to the community, or from their off-campus residence to the next property. So we recognise that we need to start planning for that now. So that's going to happen over the summer. But again, we've been informed by what our students are telling us. Some things are very cyclical, so we know that we need to plan it in. But again, this is very much driven by what we hear from our students, as well as the kind of business as usual, in line with the student calendar of events. So in terms of some useful links, I'm heavily involved with an organisation called ASRA, which is the Association of Student Residential Accommodation. You can have a look at their website, and that's for colleagues that work in student accommodation, but in all aspects. So, for example, if there's anyone on the call involved in Res Life, then that's something that you might want to look up if you're not already familiar with ASRA. Big shout out to my colleagues at Campus Life, who are really fantastic at what they do, and they've got some great videos, and it would be worth going and have a look at some of the innovative campaigns that they've developed. And students really are at the heart of everything that they do. UKTGA stands for the United Kingdom Town and Gown Association. So this is an organisation that myself and my manager established back in 2014. Town and Gown is everything that we've discussed. It's where you have the town folk meet the gown folk, and how those communities can live and work harmoniously together. So we've brought together a group of colleagues that do very similar roles to me from up and down the country, and we work together to leading practice and support each other on all sorts of campaigns and events. So most recently there was some interesting campaigns that were being delivered by Queen's University Belfast in the run-up to St Patrick's Day. Have a look at the website, because we publish a lot of the work that we're doing on there. Linked to that is the ITGA, which is the International Town and Gown Association, which is based in South Carolina in America, and they're a really, really well established network from all across North America, and we work very closely with them. Again, they do very similar work that we do with the UK TGA. Obviously, they have very different laws around alcohol over there. But again, there's a plethora of information and campaigns and leading practices on their website. And then finally, I mentioned Mandrake, which is the drug testing facility run by Oliver Sutcliffe out of Manchester Metropolitan University. So it's worth having a look at that link as well. So thank you very much for your time and for your patience with some of the tech issues. And if you've got any questions, I would be delighted to answer.
Just while we're waiting for some questions to come in, to give people a chance to submit those, I was just thinking, so I know you mentioned, well, one thing that I really, really loved in your presentation was how you talked about students as being part of the local community. I think we often hear about it as students and the local community rather than students in the local community, which is really, really great. I've heard before of some initiatives to help students who are moving into an area kind of integrate with long-term residents. And I think a lot of the issues that come out of that come around alcohol use and kind of people getting annoyed with students for kind of coming home drunk and stuff is to do with them not necessarily seeing students as people. And I've heard of initiatives like people taking like little notes, or like students' unions giving plants for people to give to their neighbours and things like that. Have you heard of any initiatives or ideas that kind of help our students to kind of make those links with neighbours and kind of improve relations, or do you think that they're a bit gimmicky, and what's your perspective on that?
Okay, thank you, Michelle. There are some things that I think don't necessarily work as well. So there was one that was floating around not so long ago, which was a postcard which you could clip a tea bag to and then go and post it through your neighbour's door and say like, "Hi, have a brew on me." If someone just put a manky tea bag through my door, I think I appreciate the sentiment, but I think I probably I wouldn't use that. Some things that we've done in Manchester that have worked really well. So we got a group of students to work with a group of long-term residents to come up with a campaign called Hidden Gems, and this was aimed at encouraging students to go and explore the local community and ultimately feel very much a part of the community and utilise the local parks and shop local and get to know the local community assets. So that was a really, really effective campaign, and we came up with a list of about 25 hidden gems, and we had some maps that we then made virtual and encouraged people to go out on walking tours. They were actually very popular. So we had students and long-term residents, and we had students as tour guides going around and saying, "And on your left we have a heart-shaped boating lake, and on the right is a I'm going to get this wrong, but it's a water trough from the 1800s at the end of Copson Street. And then, for anyone who wants to stay, let's go for a pint or, have a glass of orange juice at the Red Lion, which has got a beautiful bowling green at the back." So we've done stuff like that. We did our Hidden Gems campaign as virtual gems at the beginning of lockdown a year ago, and we passed that out via various different channels to try and encourage students to look at the local area, but virtually from the safety of their own home. The other thing that we've done as well is that we've had some funding in the past from universities to put on community events. So we had two in particular. One was called Community Fun Fest, which was taking the idea of a party, which unfortunately has quite a negative connotation in some of the communities within South Manchester, and turn it into a street party where we got student volunteers to come along and play music. So we had Royal Northern College of Music playing the harp, and then we had singers. We also had students that were sold their own produce to come along and bake cakes. We had organic coffee bites. We had a washing line where people could talk about their memories of the local area. We did that, and it was really, really well attended. And the whole idea was come out and see what's going on in the street, and actually, you know, have a organic coffee and get to know your neighbours and strike up a conversation. We also did something similar called it was had a focus on health and well-being, where we sectioned off part of the park, and we had things like space hoppers and hula hoops and Reiki, and we encouraged long-term residents and students to come out and sort of get together and be part of this. So we've done that, and that's worked very well. I think the challenge is that each year we need to keep up the momentum, because most students move on from their particular house, you know, in any given year. But you know, we do lots of things. So the other thing is, at the start of the academic year, and then periodically we work with the city council and the police to hire an ice cream van, and we go around and hand out free ice cream to all members of our community. So instead of a 99er, you can have a 999er, and then there will be a police officer doing your Mr. Whippy or whatever and handing the students the ice cream. But again, it's just a way to have that kind of, I don't really like the phrase, but teachable moment, where you can have a chat with someone, have an ice cream, and the long-term residents love it just as much as the students do.
I bet.
You know, we'll go out there and say free ice creams for everybody, and people sort of just get together. It always rains though, that's the thing, it always rains. So yeah, things like that we do a lot of. And the other thing as well, and I'm sorry I meant to mention it, is we've recently got some funding from the Community Safety Partnership at Manchester City Council. So a big shout out to them that have given us some funding for some community playing cards. We've done this before, but we've had to revise some of the messages. So they're just packs of playing cards, but on each one there's a message about one of the thematic policy areas that I mentioned before. But we get some really, really good feedback from students about them. They love having a free pack of cards. They do tell me that they use them. And again, anything that we can do to just drip feed those messages, whether it's about drugs, alcohol, where to go for support, how to get housing advice, how to stay safe, how to have the best possible student experience. If we can just get those messages out at every opportunity, then that's what we're aiming to do.
That sounds fantastic. And I bet that there are so many people on the call who would really love to have an organisation like you in their local area. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing all of your learnings with us.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we have reached the end of the Students' Alcohol and Drugs Conference. I hope that you've all really enjoyed it. We will be sharing the videos with you. So we'll be sharing the video tomorrow morning of all of the sessions today. And then it might just take us a couple of days just to process them and put them all on a private YouTube channel that you can visit as well. Because at the minute, the recordings from Zoom will just show you a whole day at once, which can be a little bit less user-friendly. But I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Poppy and all of the other speakers. I know some of you are still on the line for helping us with the conference. It's the first time that we've included drugs as a topic, but we've tried to keep it kind of quite broad, and including people like Poppy in it is vital, as we don't solve the issues around drugs and alcohol in isolation from other student wellbeing issues. So a huge thank you to everybody for being involved, and I'll hope to see you next year, if not before.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.